but that actually increases the muscle in your brain that helps with willpower and motivation. So
I don't eat that much. And you're kind of like, physics doesn't really agree with that statement. And it's
right.
not to be insulting, but the reality is, like, what people don't understand is your hormones are so overpowering, especially when they're out of whack.
So you're like, I'm restricting. Why am I not losing weight? And the study I read, they were reporting 1,300 calories. In reality, they were having 2,400 calories.
Oh, wow. Jane Burnette, thanks so much for joining the show today. So we're talking about, Jane is a health coach focusing primarily on perimenopause, menopausal women. So we're getting some women's health topics today. And we've kind of overlapped quite a bit over the years, and just, appreciate you jumping on and just getting some education out there to a lot of our, especially our female audience. Like, women's audience seems really, really underserved. And I think it's great to get some good contact. Someone like yourself who's a practitioner is just, working with so many women in so many different modalities and with different, obstacles they're facing. But welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
So, I think the first thing, just to kind of get into, I've seen, men that focus on women's health, obviously women that focus on women's health, just curious. And I've seen women that focus on men's health, and that's all they do is men's health, which is kind of interesting too. What is it that drove you to want to primarily just focus on, I guess, women first, and then, perimenopause, menopausal women?
Yeah. Well, first, I'm perimenopausal. So I wanted to kind of help me. I'm my own guinea pig. So I've tried a bunch of things myself. And, truly, I can say I feel better at 48 than I did at 28. So, I feel like the perimenopause, menopausal time in a female's life could be kind of like a second spring. It's like your kids are usually older if you have kids. You're established in your career. You have a little bit more time for yourself. And so I love this group. I call us kind of the unicorns, because what works for everyone else doesn't necessarily work for us. So it's been fun to kind of crack the code with women, and we're all so different, and kind of see what works best for that person. So, you've got stress, you've got sleep, you've got hormonal imbalances, you've got diet. There's a lot of things a lot of levers we can work on to optimize health.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's, I would imagine too, just kind of as you went through life, does that help you a lot? Just having some of that, I've seen some, like I said, I've seen some really, really good, effective male coaches, but you're curious to how your own kind of journey through those stages, like how that's been able to help you with coaching, and how do you apply that with your clients?
Yeah. So, I feel like, a lot of coaches become coaches because they have their own health struggles.
Sure.
And, mine started after the birth of my third child. And I realized I had hypothyroid, and no one would have tested me unless I would have gone and done gone to a more integrative practice. And I realized, that what a big difference that was. Down the path, I took out gluten, as part of a change in my diet, and saw immediate benefits with that. I also was pre-diabetic. And so and again, looking at me, I don't look like a stereotypical type 2 diabetic. So again, I would not have been tested by a conventional doctor and to see that I had an elevated A1C. And just for those who don't know what that is, it's a 3-month blood sugar average. So mine was elevated. And I was a health coach. So, I'm learned now how cortisol and how, a protein heavy breakfast and food timing and all of those things can really help your A1C. So again, I got into, perimenopause and, struggled with sleep, and saw how amazing progesterone was for that. And so I'm all for the hormone replacement if it's necessary.
Yeah, sure. No, and I think, for a lot of women too that out there, I would imagine, I'd like to hear a little bit about your experiences, but many of the ones that I just hear these stories about. I think the healthcare and more the scientific literature that's out there, it's getting better, but it's nowhere near where it is with men. Um, and it seems like I don't really blame all the doctors for this either, because I just don't know that they're really trained on that. It's almost like the same adage from 60 years ago where it's like, yeah, this is healthy aging. It's just a process. Was that a little bit of what your experience was and kind of related to with your clients, where it's just, yeah, you're just not sleeping, you're getting older, these things happen? Was it kind of brushed off, or what was your experience like?
Yeah, yeah. No, I hate when people say my doctor said it was just because I'm aging. That is not a thing in my in my book, you know.
Right.
Definitely this is just part of you going through hormonal changes. And so you're just gonna have to live with it, you know, for sure. In my personal experience. You know, with integrative health, it's totally different. I mean, there's so many options. And you know, I do like to focus on the big rocks like sleep, stress, movement, and diet before I do recommend, you know, the hormone replacement and pharmaceutical supplements, things like that. Because I do think those are the core things, but there's some people that just need more than that.
Sure. Yeah, it's when I wonder how much, and I'm just curious to get your take on it, because you kind of brought up gluten earlier. Obviously the higher A1C, which you were a health coach, that's kind of like, well, that doesn't make sense. Like how much of these hormonal changes, because we definitely have plenty of great research with men showing the declines in testosterone, even as a population. And then they've done studies in a similar geographical area over time, like comparing it to 50 years ago and so on. And some of them have been as much as 40 to 60% less total testosterone in men. So I'm curious to what do you attribute to some of the female women obstacles, / maybe it is also kind of a combination of some of the we also know there's a connection to the gut health, the gut microbiome, to our hormone production. So what are some things that do you attribute food quality currently today? Do you attribute some of the changes in kind of a more modernized society, if you will, that have some good to it, but then maybe there's some spillover that's causing this? Is that, or do you feel like women just always went through this for all of time? Like what's kind of your,
Yeah.
to some degree, like it seems like it's happening earlier and more aggressive.
Yeah. So the gluten in the United States is different from Europe. So there's two different things that we're kind of struggling with gluten in the United States. Number one, it's really sprayed with Roundup, basically the stuff you spray your weeds in the backyard. So you've got that issue that contributes to leaky gut. And then you also just have, relatively speaking, grains have been around for about 10,000 years. So our body, some of us just can't process it as well.
Sure.
As far as, I ate tons of gluten when I was little and that kind of thing. And I do think because gluten can is higher in carbohydrates, most foods that contain gluten, I did see a difference, when I got in my early 40s, that I couldn't do the carbs like I used to. I don't villainize carbs in any way. There's tons of healthy carbs. But I do think for women that are going through perimenopause, menopause, we do become more insulin resistant due to the decline in estrogen. And thankfully, we are seeing more research studies on that it's not just, you drink more wine and you have more calories, and that's why have more of the visceral fat, and that's why you're pre-diabetic and all of these things. So science is catching up to us women on that.
Yeah, no, that's good stuff. Glad you're kind of experiencing some of that, and with the people you're working with, and you have, more resources and tools and things. I'm curious with like some of the clients when they come in, you mentioned habit changes. So I'd like to maybe rest here for a little bit and kind of unpack it step by step. So if you think about, we're going to paint with a little bit of a broad brush here, but what is the typical woman coming in to work with you, perimenopause, let's say? What does she sound like? What is she, what's the energy she's giving off? What's kind of life like for her today? And then I would like to we can get into kind of your first steps you take with them.
Yeah. So a lot of women that I see are not eating enough calories, or they're underreporting calories.
Mm,
They're also not consuming a lot of protein. So I've heard of a stat that the average female consumes about 70 grams of protein a day,
yeah.
which protein is the most satiating of the three macronutrients: carbs, proteins, fats. Alcohol is actually the fourth macronutrient, but we don't count that because it's actually a toxin. So they're not eating enough protein. They're hungry. Not, they follow the calories in, calories out, which I do believe that's part of it. But they're exercising too much and eating too little, which can work in the short term, but then they're going to binge, or fall off the wagon, eventually, because that's just not sustainable long term.
Yeah. And what about the mindset? Like, how are they coming in to meet with you? Do you feel like, there's an overwhelmed feeling, stress, anxiety, maybe even defeated, deflated, maybe some depression there? Or do you feel like something else is kind of happening when they come in? I'm just curious to what your experience is like.
Yeah, all of the above. I mean, we as females, it's in this age, stress is an issue. And so it can look a lot of different ways, whether that's anxiety or depression, sleeplessness, all of those things. I definitely see more stressed out females because they're trying to do everything right, and they're also really frustrated. So that's a common word I hear from my female clients.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I have some theories on it, but what do I know? Because I'm a man. But but it does kind of seem to think, or you see as you kind of progress through life, you look at your grandma and you or your spouse's parents, and you kind of look at or ask questions, and you're like, how do they live? How do they think? Right? And I feel like there has kind of just been this evolving change over the years that it was like homemaker, super mom involved in everything with the kids, or you're a bad mom if you're not. Never the
Mhm.
pressure on the dad, but
Mhm.
you're a bad mom if you're not. And all the stress of like taking care of a household and such, and you have three kids, as you mentioned. So, and then all of a sudden there's this cultural shift where like they got to be Miss Batty, where she's like super fit and jacked as far as when it comes to fitness and sports. And oh, by the way, she's also Miss Executive XYZ. And not that anything of those things are wrong, but it just what I'm experiencing with at least many of the female clientele that I've had the opportunity to interact with, or just other coaches and people I talk to, it just seems like it's like those two kind of worlds are colliding in their everyday life. And of course, like even guys, like who wants to admit they can't do all that, right?
Mhm.
And I kind of see that happening. And I think it kind of wears a lot down. And then who else, right? Like I can cook food. It's not going to taste good. It's just the way it is, to where,
Yeah.
that's kind of the other part that's just historically been the food preparation. And then, but if both are working full-time partners and they're both kind of even involved with the kids, it's like, well, now what are we doing? We're eating out more. We're eating processed. We gotta grab stuff, because I know sometimes in my day, it's like, we'll both work. We'll both go to jujitsu together. We'll have a great time, do our thing. And then it's like, we'll look at each other like, who's cooking? And it's like, well, I guess we'll try to grab something healthy out there.
Yeah.
But I'm just, curious if you're kind of seeing some of that, just even like a cultural change as far as like how we live in that dynamic. And I think some people do it better as a team than others, but
Mhm.
it just kind of seems like that's happening a lot. And it just seems to be a bit much for people.
Yeah, I think it's nice, when a client or friend, when you give them permission, like it's okay to outsource.
Right. 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 Right.
To have someone clean your house, if you think about your hourly, if you broke down your salary to your hourly wage, like it could be worth someone going to Costco for you. I
Right.
actually had this conversation with an accountant, and she's around my age. She's like, I'm doing really well. In my work, and I'm finally feeling comfortable financially, and I'm like, go pay for someone. And like you
Right.
said, I mean, she's going out to dinner and going out to lunch. But outsource. It's okay.
Right. Right.
And the food you're going to pay for someone to go to Costco and get is going to be a lot better quality and less expensive overall than what you get at DoorDash.
Right. So going back to that kind of that starting point, like what is kind of the first, if you could think of like maybe, of course, again, this is just wide range here, but what comes to mind when you think of like some of the first nutrition hacks, if you will, or goals or targets? Like what are the first things you work on typically with some of these women that are coming in to see you?
Yeah, I think for me, to be the best coach for them, it's going to be tracking their food.
Mhm.
And as a health coach for many years, I hated tracking my food. But now I've tracked it consistently, and it ends up taking maybe 5 minutes of your day. So you can scroll 5 minutes less on social media. And it just, in my opinion, when you flip the mindset to beat myself up, I didn't meet my goals today, versus to education, like I had this much protein or this many carbs at breakfast, and I realized I couldn't get out of the pantry after dinner, so I like to kind of to switch it to, this is education. And we don't really, it's kind of like budgeting money. If you don't know kind of where your calories are going, how much protein you're having, how much fiber you're having, you really don't know where to start. So I like for clients to start with tracking their food and getting comfortable with that. And if someone's like, that's totally overwhelming for me, I would say just start tracking protein.
Right.
Like if that's what you can do, and you can do that by, having a protein goal at each meal. And that may require, if you're, having a chicken breast or something like that, like weighing it out and making sure you're getting like 5 to 7 ounces of cooked chicken breast, or any, animal protein, or, tally up your protein powder and all the stuff you add in your smoothie. But that's a really simple way. If the thought of tracking your every single morsel is overwhelming for you.
I think that's a good tip, because I like how you frame that. Because I do think some people, I was having a conversation the other day, and I was with a family member just trying to help out, not doing, hands-on full-time coaching or anything. But we're just talking about their food goals, and they work with a coach, great, really good coach. But the framing was exactly what you said, frame it as educational. It's just feedback to teach you. Theirs was pass fail. Like, I'm failing. And I'm like, okay, what's your protein target? And it's, whatever it was, 150 grams. I said, great. How often do you hit that? Once a week? Oh, I was like, see how your posture changed? I was like, your posture changed, your tone. I was like, you're just defeated by that. But it's a number. Mm-hmm. So I said, I was like, I use the analogy, and some people may understand this right away, but have you ever heard of Dave Ramsey?
Yes.
So Dave Ramsey has the analogy, right, where we're paying off debt, and he talks about smallest debt to largest, doesn't care about interest rate. Now every financial person's like, well, but you're paying a higher interest and you should pay that off first. And he's like, it's a behavioral issue. It's not a financial issue as much as it is a behavioral issue. So I'd use the same analogy with her. I said, what do you say we start at, you're getting 70 grams a day. Let's start at 100. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean your coach is wrong. Start at 100 for 7 days, mm-hmm. then go to 110. Then go to 120. I was like, now you start building that momentum. I was like, because now you're like, oh, okay, I got this. And, then a one-off is truly by definition what it is. It's a one-off. It only happens once in a while when you miss that target, versus I feel defeated 6 out of 7 days. After a couple of months, that who wants to track it? It's such this negative association. So I really like how you're framing that as like, it's just an educational feedback tool. You can see what you eat. And I think that's another great way to do it, because a lot of people I've worked with don't want to measure their food. And I'll just say, well, if you just measure it for a little while, mm-hmm. now you're going to have that mental picture of like, what is 6 ounces versus 4 ounces versus 10 ounces? What does it look like? Right. And I think that's really empowering,
Which is cool, because then you can go to a restaurant and you can kind of start to have an idea of how much you're having, So it really has been super helpful for me. It's changed my body composition, in addition to strength training. But it's once you get the hang of it, it's really awesome.
Yeah.
And it actually, protein's actually a natural GLP-1. It works with similar to the GLP-1 agonist. It helps with satiety and slowing the gastric emptying, all of those things. And you can do that just by optimizing your protein intake.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, obviously these treatments out there, they work great for people, but there's also a lot of, I just always try to think of, if you're going to use those, that's fine, but just also don't forget about what nature provides us too, to help induce that. And you can save a lot of money and you don't have to take as much if you are using it, and you can get a lot better results that much faster. So, I think speaking with that, how has that changed for you in working with women ever since the GLP-1's been on the market for weight loss?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say when I first heard about GLP-1s and I started seeing all the celebrities doing it and they had the Ozempic face and all of that, I was like, they're just taking the easy way out,
Right.
Now I see so many benefits to it. And so even, short term, if you need this and learn some healthy habits along the way while you're on it, I think it's fantastic, for the person that may need it. The things that it's showing to help with addiction, cardiovascular, neurodegenerative disease. I think it's great. And I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. So it's like, how can we work with this and use it for a positive instead of just using it as like a crutch? Like, okay, I have to be on this for the rest of my life. You may not have to, especially if you're not a type 2 diabetic. Then it can be really helpful. I've seen women that have this great diet. They're doing all the right things and they're not seeing the scale change. So, I even have, some people say don't use it for the vanity weight. I think it's kind of helpful, even if you were to use it short term and you were to finally see the scale change, it kind of gives you momentum to keep going.
Right. No, I think, a lot of, you're talking about this earlier, you're talking about like nutrition and they're under eating or under reporting. And I think that's a really important thing for people to understand there, because it's tough, right? You don't want to be insulting the person when they're telling you, well, I don't eat that much. I don't eat that much. And you're kind of like, physics doesn't really agree with that statement. And it's not to be insulting, but the reality is, like, what people don't understand is your hormones are so overpowering, especially when they're out of whack. If you take your insulin response, it's so overpowering. You don't even consciously realize how much food you grabbed walking from your office to the bathroom and back, and you just grab something, you're like, and then you remember, like, I ate so little, I ate this lunch, dinner, breakfast, what's going on? And it's like, that little thing of M&Ms that's in the middle. I mean, I'm being, I'm being maybe a little dramatic, but it's like, how many times have you grabbed that throughout the day and you didn't even realize it? And that's not to like criticize that. It's just give yourself a fighting chance. And a lot of what those GLP-1s or even some of the natural methods to lower that, they give you a chance to fight back against that, because you have some metabolic dysfunction that for whatever reason happened, a string of kids, maybe some challenges during pregnancy, maybe some dramatic life events threw you off your game for a few years. You're going to need, it was an aggressive intervention that got you off your game, or maybe on this track of not being as healthy as you like to. You might need to take some aggressive intervention to kind of not, I say aggressive loosely, but it's pretty dang safe, but then to kind of knock you back into line with having a fight. I mean, I think I've seen, if you're outside of like a metabolic ward study, good luck hitting your calories every day for that long, regardless of how much willpower you have. I think I've seen it anywhere from 20 as high as 60% of inaccurate in some of the research, like inaccurate in their caloric reporting.
Yes.
And they're like, wait a minute, what? And it's like, they're not lying. They're not trying to hide anything. They just didn't even realize it,
Yeah. Yeah. And it's that dieting mindset. So you're like, I'm restricting. Why am I not losing weight? And the study I read, they were reporting 1,300 calories. In reality, they were having 2,400 calories.
Oh, wow.
So, and it's the same for like dietitians and health coaches too. I mean, we're not perfect with it either. So it is helpful to use that, the tracking and things like that, and to really make sure that fourth of a cup of nuts is actually the serving size you're having. Like I see that a ton, from rice to nuts, people tend to massively underreport that. And it's actually kind of freeing. You're like, okay, my metabolism isn't broken. Like I'm actually just eating more calories than I thought I was.
I realized, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I have a friend who's about 6'5", 260, and he goes, yeah, the only thing I ever do off the diet is I have a bowl of cereal here and there. I'm like, You are a large fellow. That's a box of cereal, bro. Like that is not a little kid size little bowl. I'm like, you
Yeah.
probably had like 1,000. I mean, I'm being a little exaggerated.
Yeah.
I'm like, that is a lot. Like there's, but again, in his mind, it's just some cereal. I'm like,
Mhm.
show me that, giant bowl like you see in like a kid's cartoon when the giant's eating cereal. It's like,
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. We're having way more than that serving size on the package.
well, you were talking earlier about nutrition changes, and how you unpack that with a new client. I'd like to get a little bit into activity. Do you do steps? How do you get someone from not moving, maybe a little depressive, overwhelmed state? I don't have time for that, Jane. Like, what do you mean? Like, how do you get them from that to get them moving? What are some strategies you do, or some first steps, just to kind of, if you were to give some of the women listening out there some tips on how they would approach that?
Yeah, well, steps are my number one thing. Like if you can get your steps in, what's interesting, if you put yourself in a calorie deficit, okay, if you're trying to lose weight, our body naturally wants homeostasis. So we're going to naturally move less, and we're going to move less with our hands. We're going to blink less. We're going to do all these things that are burning, or that typically burn calories. But we can't really track that, and we can't really go lower in calorie. We can't try to blink more.
Right.
We can track our steps. So what happens with people is that they naturally just start moving less. So I like to, have people track their steps. I tell people it's almost refreshing when I would say you don't have to walk all at one time. You don't have to
Right.
get your 8,000 steps all at once. You can do little mini walks, and actually that's better for blood sugar. And I just really meet them where they are. So, if they're currently doing 2,000 steps a day, we try 3,000. Kind of like you were saying with your family member with protein, just adding and just having that awareness. And as silly as it is, we've heard about this all the time. Park further away at the parking lot. Take the stairs at work. All those little things add up.
Sure.
And just if you don't know how many steps you're doing a day, then you don't know really where to go. But I do recommend steps first, and I do think that if we're looking at the total daily energy expenditure, so how many calories we burn in a day, a lot of that is based on body size and muscle mass. But then the next lever is actually that non-exercise activity thermogenesis, and that's just steps. That's low stress. For women especially, it's great for cortisol. It lowers our stress. If you can do it outside, that's even better. You're getting all the benefits that the sun brings for hormones and all of that good stuff. So I think, and it's kind of fun to, especially in a group setting, I found with my groups to make it kind of like a step challenge.
Yeah.
There's some great apps out there that have that, where you can join a group, a spring group or a summer group, and try to, increase your steps.
I think that's a great point. I did a step challenge once, and I was like, oh, I'm probably pretty good. And I was like, oh my gosh, I barely moved like these 3 days in a row. And I think going back to education, don't think pass fail. I mean, this is what I hear you saying. Don't think pass fail. Where you are is where you are. Start tracking it. And let's bump it up a little bit. And then you go, I did park all this week a little further from the office. I went from 2,000 to 3,000. Hey, Jane, what should I do now? All right, let's add this in, or whatever the fill in the blank is, right? Yeah. I just think it's more empowering to walk that through. But I saw this reel that says you have to get a minimum of 10,000 steps. And they said there was a study that showed it, right? Like what it's like, I get it. Let's get there, but let's start with where we are, right?
Exactly. I think baby steps win long-term for sure.
Well, I think one of the other interesting things I'm sure you're seeing a lot, we kind of dabble a little bit in GLP-1s. Also, we talked a lot about hormone changes. Of course, we're first addressing, it sounds like you're addressing, nutrition, you're addressing stress management, you're addressing movement and exercise. So those things are working, not working. I mean, they're definitely not working, but maybe they're not working fast enough or effective enough. The person needs a little more. Now you're kind of getting into, hormones, and then you find out, there's some hormone issues there. How often are you seeing hormones being an obstacle for women in these perimenopause, menopausal states, causing some of their issues, have it be with stress management, with weight management, with all of the above?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think in Japan, well, way back when, I think the United States has infiltrated all countries, but there was no word for menopause. So,
Mm,
I mean, it was just, they effortlessly went through menopause, what we call menopause. No hot flashes, none of that. I think with our modern world, we could do a ton of stuff, but some of us just require extra help. And I think that hormone replacement, I still get all the time, people scared of it. And it's the generation, an entire generation, basically, they quit prescribing these medications. I think the Women's Health Initiative was massively miscommunicated to the public.
right.
And the benefits it's showing, again, I go back to neurocognitive health, for estrogen, that in itself, usually we see Alzheimer's, dementia start to happen around menopause symptoms, as estrogen declines for women. As men, it's usually when they retire from their job and they've lost their purpose.
Mm,
So why not use this?
right.
I feel like, and this is where First Optimal comes. You're gonna look at everything. You're gonna make sure that this is a good option for you. But I do think that there's some women that just, menopause is not effortless, and
Right.
they need that help. A good night of sleep can really cure a lot of the world's problems for for anybody.
Right.
So if you're not sleeping, then it's going to be tough to eat, to make good choices with nutrition, to want to move the next day, to be on your A game at work, all of those things. So I've found that it is very helpful for perimenopause to menopause to even to postmenopausal women.
Yeah. No, and you mentioned the Women's Health Initiative, and I think there's a combination of some things. There's obviously, the study was done. I think there's the opportunities within the study that many have, that do this with their entire lives. They've dedicated research to, that have criticized it, and rightfully so. And there's been multiple studies counter to it. But I think there's like two parts to it. There was a kind of the actual study, and then there's also the way, to your point, that it was delivered
Mhm.
to the general public. Because, and I'm curious to hear, there's a couple that come to mind of some of the critiques that seem very valid and reasonable after you hear it of that study. Is there anything that you've maybe referenced for women who are uncomfortable with that? Obviously, you're saying, as you would, right? Like, hey, I'm not a doctor, talk to your physician, those type of things. But hey, here's a few things that was wrong with that study, or here's a few bullet points about it. What is it that you would tell women who are coming in and they're scared of these therapies?
Yeah, so I actually wrote a few notes on this. First of all, the participants in the group had pre-existing health issues, and they were also 10 years post-menopausal.
Hmm.
Now, I do, depending on the circumstance, I don't disagree with giving, progesterone and estrogen even after menopause because of the benefits with sleep and with brain health. But the interesting thing that I have learned about how it was misrepresented, the estrogen only group showed a 23% lower risk of developing breast cancer over 20 years. And then they had a 30% lower risk of dying from breast cancer. The small increase in breast cancer in the estrogen and progestin group was not statistically significant and amounted to less than one extra case per 1,000 women per year. That, to me, I mean, it was, from my perspective, and when it first came out, I remember it, it was like, you're going to die from breast cancer if
Right.
you take this. So it's almost like give the female the pros and cons and let her decide instead of just not even recommending it, period. So that's that's my my opinion on the Women's Health Initiative. I think it just was massively useful.
Yeah, and that's not going to be communicated in the in the media to like the control group or the pre-existing conditions or the use of synthetic forms of these hormones, which again, we're not telling people what to take or how to take it, but there are other methods of administration. They're bioidentical. They're more favorable treatments out there that were out there back then, but those were not in a study. And I know that's not going to get clicks. That's not going to get views
Right.
when that comes up. So it's just going to be this fear mongering of, some of the cliff notes there. So I think it's important for people to talk to someone who can actually reference it. And, if you didn't study that, you don't know how to read research, you don't know how to really look at it for yourself, that's fine. Work with someone you can trust that can do that, and they can explain and break that down, because that's a very common thing in research is this does this. And I'm like, that was a mouse study.
Yeah.
Maybe it's applicable.
Yeah.
Maybe, but let's pause. Yeah. Or these guys had this % of heart attacks. How many of them are screened for cardiovascular events? And they're all overweight and they're in their 60s and they started a study and then they had cardiovascular cardiovascular events during that, or X% did. It's like, but they weren't pre-screened.
Yeah. I mean, you really,
maybe they would have had it anyways. It's
if you look at research studies, and I'm trying to get better at it, but you can kind of pull apart the bias of that research. And it's really amazing to me how you can take this study that, and if you look at it and you can kind of pull things that you want. And like you said, it's the clickbait, it's the headlines that are going to get the most attention.
Right.
So.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that though. So now you're working with this, these women, they start moving a little bit. They're kind of tracking their food, increasing that protein. Hey, maybe it was the thing where, hormone replacement was for them. What are you seeing kind of halfway through a time period with you? Like, I know, I'm sure many of them work with you for a long period of time and really being involved in their overall life, especially after getting those first results. But just in that first phase, now they're coming out the other end of it. What are they seeing? What are they reporting back to you? What are some things that you're noticing as far as the results? Is there like a multiple there? Is there an amplifying of that? Is there, what is some of the things that kind of come up?
Yeah, well, energy is a big thing that I start to see with women, and then sleep. And I guess it's kind of that those go hand in hand. That kind of underlying just malaise tends to be lifted too.
Sure.
And just kind of an overall more elevated, I guess, emotional mindset type thing, I would say, because you do have the energy to move more and to make better decisions with your diet. And you are getting a good night of sleep. So, it's just a gradual thing. And it's something that I try to practice this myself, but to recognize those little wins that you do.
Yep.
Because we don't really remember how we feel when we first got on something, Right. So because we're, humans, we're just going to be really hard on ourselves, like we've talked about with the tracking and all of that. So to celebrate those wins and to have those little dopamine hits along the way, because, it's a shame that, and I don't do this. I should do more of this, but have kind of like an assessment of all the things in the beginning, and then see how gradually, I can make observations and share back with clients. Like, you didn't have energy. You weren't sleeping, when you first started. Like, do you remember that? And it's like, oh yeah, I forgot. Now it's like on to the next thing, which is great, but it's like, celebrate that. So you can have that dopamine hit.
I'm curious to how you do that too. I think it's a really great point. Even if coaches are listening to this, are you doing periodic check-ins with the same or similar questions and then giving that feedback back to them, how they responded? Do you have any method to that, or do you kind of go off of feel? Is it like, hey, a month at first when they started, then 6 months, 3 months, or is it kind of based on feel that you do that check-in, like to kind of have that conversation?
Yeah, it's honestly, I would say, I do take notes after each session or during a session. But it's more feel like it depends on the person.
Sure.
But I do make an effort to definitely share the wins that they've had. And I like to start off all my coaching sessions with, what is your win?
Right.
Share your wins for the week. And they might be grabbing stuff. They're like, well, I had a protein heavy breakfast one day. Okay, that's awesome. So, like, let's talk about how you felt that day, or I got my steps this day. And what did you do to get those steps that day? So, I think that definitely at the beginning of each session, I do like to ask for wins. For whatever reason, we don't like to brag, but it's fun as a coach for me to hear the wins of
Sure.
the week or of every few weeks.
No, and I think that's great because, like you said, you're creating a positive momentum to where it's like, we don't live in the rearview mirror. Like, why are you going there? Like, why
Mm-hmm.
are you not meaning like, let's take this 30 seconds and celebrate the one thing, even though it's one thing. Don't tell me the 99 things you didn't do and where you failed. Like,
Yeah.
that's more like, bring a few of those up maybe to help troubleshoot it, is what I'm hearing and what I would gather in those sessions. But let's not sit here and dwell and, Eeyore is your spirit animal, and we're just going to like kick ourselves and walk around.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay. Like, let's just keep moving
Right.
and on to the next week, and you keep moving forward, because it's not ending. Like, I think that's where people get in this mind trap where it's like, well, I'm doing this program for 3 months or a month or what. And it's like, it's just a new lifestyle. Like,
Yeah.
you're going to have some things. And I think you did say something interesting earlier. I wanted to circle back to, was I heard this from a family member. They were like, this is going to sound dumb. And I said, no, go ahead. And they were like, I feel, they use the word depressed. It's like, I feel so depressed that I look at my treadmill and I'm like, I can't get up and go walk on it. I get it. I know it feels dumb, Joe. And I'm like, no, it doesn't seem dumb at all. Turns out, and again, there's application, not my expertise. There is application for certain, depressive treatments and medications, things like that. So setting that aside, in this particular instance, the person didn't have the raw materials, the hormones,
Mm-hmm.
just to give them a little bit more energy.
Mm-hmm.
They had the energy. Now all of a sudden the depression's gone. It's like, you were just tired. Yeah, we can use that word kind of loosely. We probably use it a little too loosely, where we could say it was depression, but it really was just fatigue and tired.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden you start walking and start moving. And I'm not saying everybody's going to be some miracle, but I just feel like if you have the raw materials to do things, you're more likely to do things, just dietary, hormonal, whatever the case may be.
Right.
It's not always, I think people think so, like, we got these really complex, bodies from fingers to toes that have all these processes in them. And we just go here and we just think like, well, I need the willpower. I'm not mentally strong and I failed mentally. And it's like, but what other organs are not functioning right? Or what's going on in your blood and all this stuff? Like,
Mhm.
let's just slow down here. Stop blaming just that one part of you. Maybe there's some other things going on that it's an uphill battle. Like, why,
Yeah.
does that kind of resonate with what you're seeing with people? Or
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do feel like you said that, depressed gets kind of thrown around a whole lot. And it's just, and this is where I do think a coach comes in really handy. Now, I know I'm biased here, but to kind of, push a little bit with, well, if you need the hormones or the thyroid medication and things like that, but just to do that, to give a baby step, and again, just to recognize, okay, I was able to meet that goal on this day, but I do have a lot of empathy. Just, I'm sure most families have struggles with mental illness and
sure.
things like that. But I do think that there's a lot of things that you can do, and I think a lot of us, our identity is based on the negatives of us,
Right.
so we have this autoimmune disease, so we can't do this, or we have, these responsibilities, so we can't do this, and this. I see it with food sensitivity tests. I can't eat
Mm,
anything. And really, you got to look at all the things you can do. And there's a whole lot more than you think, I would
right.
imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's a great point, because I think someone like yourself who's had these conversations many, many times doesn't mean Mr. or Mrs. Client, like, you're any less important. It just means we've been there, done that, or you've been there, done that, and you've heard it. And you say, you sound defeated,
Mm-hmm.
maybe not depressed, not,
Mm-hmm.
Just telling you what I'm hearing, and of course, if their spouse says that, they're like, what do you know? It's like, of course, right? But it's just kind of just to have someone else that's in that world and they're hearing these conversations, they're hearing these struggles, I think is so valuable for people, because looking at coaching, I work with consultants all the time to help me, whether it's, leadership, life, even my own training, all these things. And then the ones that are most effective with me, they're ones say, what you sound like? You sound like, not, maybe not this bluntly. Some people might not like this part, but they may say, you're kind of making some excuses for yourself. You're letting yourself off the hook there. Or they're saying, hey, listen, you're being a little too hard. You're being like, this is how we could do this. And just looking at that coaching as part of my process to learn more. And then, the nice thing about learning is no one can ever take it away from you. It's like you have it and then you move on. So if they worked with you for 3 months, 6 months, a year, whatever the case may be, they're going to have that knowledge working knowledge for the rest of their lives to kind of be successful. So,
and one thing I will also add that I feel like we can be educated on, all the diet books, all the workout programs, all of those things. But we don't take action. And I think that all of us should have a little bit of friction every day, something that we don't want to do. And if you look at elite athletes, they do things that they don't want to do every day.
Right.
And that could even be just, I'm going to set a timer on how long I'm going to be on social media and instead go take a walk or something like that. But that actually increases the muscle in your brain that helps with willpower and motivation. So we kind of have to do those little things. And if you're experiencing, man, I don't want to do this, or, I'm looking at the treadmill and I don't want to do this, kind of embrace the friction and say, all right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it for 2 minutes and I'm done.
Right. No, it's a great point.
Yeah.
The old adage, right? Do something hard every day, right? It's just like if you do one thing that's kind of hard or difficult, or you don't want to do. It's just you start to build a callus to that little chirp in the ear that I can't do it, or I'm not going to do it, or let's look over here and do this. So, no, and I know, you have to get rolling with some time here, so I want to be respectful of that. But we'll have it in the show notes for everybody out there. How do people engage with you? Is it through social media usually, your website, referrals?
So you can reach out to me through my website. It's just www.healthcoachjane.com. And I am on social media some. It's Coach Jane BB on Instagram if you want to DM me that way.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll be sure to put that in all the show notes. People want more information. I know we're looking forward to creating some more educational content with you out there for people. So definitely send your comments, questions in, guys, and we appreciate you tuning in. So thanks so much, Jane. We'll see you.
Thanks, Joe. See ya.
So no, I appreciate that. I think it's good. Like I said, I can cut it right there. I don't think there's much that we really need to edit. I mean, I think it'll be good. Good kind of first round of some stuff, and then what I like about the transitions, we'll be able to cut reels. Like our editor can cut that, and then you can get that for your platforms as well that you can use of you talking about it. And I usually make it like the guest is the focal point in the reel a lot of times. So that'll be nice. So it just kind of highlights you and what you're talking about. But if you had 5 more minutes, I could ask you a couple questions about working with First Optimal. If that's
yeah, we definitely can do that.
No pressure on what to say. Just kind of, I just grab a few points. Just why you work with First Optimal. We can kind of talk about, why, what your experience been sending clients, what's the, the feedback, what's the conversation like that you could have with the team at First Optimal, those type of things. Essentially, why do you trust us? And then it's okay if you do this, but if you don't mention specific names, sometimes that's helpful, just because then people are like, oh, I want to work with Susie or Joe or whatever, but it's kind of big. So if you're okay with it, I'll just kind of fire some questions.
Yeah.
And then I cut all myself out. So it's just you on the screen. My voice isn't in it. But so why do you choose to work with First Optimal with your clients?
I have a ton of clients that go to conventional, traditional doctors. And my opinion of average testing versus optimal testing is very different. So I like to use the analogy of Whole Foods shopping and Walmart shopping. And just so you know, I go to Walmart and do the majority of my shopping. But if you look at, the different types of people at Walmart and you get a wide range, that's average. So I'm looking for optimal. I want everyone to have optimal numbers.
Sure.
And First Optimal is a great way. They're looking at optimal. Okay. So, and the interesting thing is, numbers are changing because the average, testosterone's getting lower and thyroid's changing just because that's the average. So I trust First Optimal that they're, not overdoing it, but they're not under prescribing as well.
Awesome. Appreciate that. What about like the experience? Maybe some clients have reported back about their interaction with the team, the services. We have an app, we deliver it right to their door. Any of those things that come, again, I don't want to put words in your mouth. So whatever comes kind of natural with some of that stuff.
Yeah, so the clients that I've sent to First Optimal, they've had a very smooth experience. So it's very user-friendly. They're able to quickly make an appointment. Most people that I talk to are like, I want to do something tomorrow. And they may not have an appointment tomorrow, but it's not going to be 4 or 5 months till they have to meet with their doctor. So, and the people that First Optimal has on their team have been great. They listen to the client. They're also very responsive to me. So if I have any questions, they're happy to, and they get back to me in a timely manner as well.
Awesome. I think last question, that was great. Thank you for that. So really quick before I ask this question though, do you do blood work and food sensitivity testing yourself?
I do it at the practice where you have to be a patient of Robin Hood. Yes.
Okay. If you were sending us someone, do we usually do their testing?
Yes. So the people that you see are non-Robin Hood local people, or they just think Robin Hood is snake oil. So
it's all good.
Sometimes we have a reputation around here, especially like with COVID and everything. We were handing out ivermectin, but that is that. So I haven't done like food sensitivities and things with you.
Well, so what we do, and I can talk to you about this. I know you got to run, but I'll ask this question quickly. But if you wouldn't mind mentioning, you can, if your clients already have labs, you can send them to us and we do a detailed lab review for them. Or they can get their labs through us. We do GI map for gut health testing, and we also do food sensitivity testing. So you like the option that they have multiple different testing and diagnostic tools for your clients when they come in, depending on their specific issues or obstacles. That'd be awesome.
Okay. Yeah. So the great thing about First Optimal is that there's a variety of testing that they can do that is not your typical testing. So one thing that I really like is food sensitivity testing. That really kind of can give me a lot of insight, things that you would not think may be causing issues for you, such as lemon or lettuce. It could be causing an issue, and that could be hindering you from your health goals. So I love the food sensitivity testing. They do the full thyroid panel, and I love the GI maps as well that they do.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Jumping on. Would you say that you would recommend us to other coaching partners, health coaches, or dietitians?
Yeah. So I would definitely, if you're a coach and you don't have the capability to do testing, this is a great option for you because you're also going to have the support from medical doctors that can prescribe the medication instead of you just being able to receive the labs and not really be able to do anything about it. So very easy to work with.
Awesome.